What have you got in your pocket?
Who, me? Monster in my pocket.
What?
Monster in my pocket. They're new, they're awesome, and they're squishy.
Before Gotta Catch 'em All took over the world, another army of tiny monsters was battling for dominance in bedrooms, backpacks, and lunchboxes everywhere. They were creepy, they were colourful, they were collectible, and for a brief moment in the early 90s, they were absolutely massive. Now this is the story of Monster in My Pocket, a franchise that seemed destined for long-term glory with toys, comics, a video game, and even its own animated special. But as quickly as it conquered the toy aisle, it vanished. And behind that disappearance is a tale of booming success, a collapsing empire, and a courtroom showdown that determined the future of pocket-sized monsters long before Pokémon arrived on American shores. So Monster in My Pocket began in 1990, at a time when the toy aisle was dominated by giants like Ninja Turtles, Transformers, and Ghostbusters. But two former Mattel executives, Joe Morrison and John Weems, saw a niche nobody else was targeting. Their new company, Morrison Entertainment Group, was built around one daring concept. Take the entire world of mythology, folklore, and classic horror creatures and shrink it into a collectible ecosystem of palm-sized monsters. And they weren't just picking the famous ones. I mean, sure, you had Dracula, you had the Hydra, and of course you had the werewolf. But you also had oddities pulled from global legend. The Tengu from Japan, Coatlicue from Aztec mythology, and dozens more creatures most kids had never even heard of. In 1990, they partnered with Matchbox, and the first wave hit store shelves. The formula was brilliant. Each monster was modeled in soft plastic and came in 4 bold, solid colors: red, yellow, purple, and olive green. And each one also had a power score from 5 to 25, giving kids a built-in way to compare their creatures. So if you pulled a 25-pointer like the Great Beast or the Werewolf, you were instantly the envy of the lunchroom. The toys were cheap, bright, durable, and extremely collectible. Kids could buy 4-packs, 12-packs, or hunt for the rare ones their friends had. It had the same addictive thrill as muscle figures, but with a spooky aesthetic perfectly suited to the early 90s. The line exploded, with over 200 monsters released across 11 series. And just like any major toy craze of the era, the franchise didn't stay confined to the toy aisle. It expanded into a full-blown multimedia empire. Trading cards, sticker books, clothing, school supplies, and lunchboxes all carried the Monster in My Pocket branding. And at its peak, the franchise amassed an incredible $100 million per year. And to give the brand a story, Morrison Entertainment created a comic book series. The plot followed the evil warlock who attempted to shrink all monsters that refused to join him, only to accidentally shrink all monsters and teleport them into modern-day Los Angeles. Led by the heroic vampire, the good monsters fought to stop Warlock from conquering the world from his tiny new form. Now that comic storyline became the basis for the animated special Monster in My Pocket, The Big Scream, produced by Hanna-Barbera and airing on Halloween 1992. A full animated series was planned, and the special functioned as a pilot. The lore was slightly altered, presenting the villains as escaped prisoners from Monster Mountain, with the vampire and the monster acting as guards trying to recapture them. But despite the strong concept and Hanna-Barbera's backing, the network passed on the series, and while the toys still sold well internationally, this marked the first crack in the franchise's armor. Still, Monster in My Pocket had one more pop culture moment left, a video game developed by Konami, the same studio behind Castlevania, Contra, and Ninja Turtles. And released for the NES in January 1992, the game let players control Vampire or the monster as they punched, kicked, and double-jumped through oversized environments, kitchen counters, backyard gardens, and of course rooftops, on a mission to stop Warlock. The graphics were colorful, the sprites were large, and the level themes were imaginative. But the gameplay was simple. No weapon upgrades, no power-ups, just straightforward platforming. It wasn't a groundbreaking title, but for kids who loved the toys, the game was a dream come true. But almost as quickly as Monster in My Pocket hit its peak, the momentum evaporated, and by late 1992, sales had collapsed in the United States. Series 5 and beyond barely appeared in American stores. On the surface, it looked like just another 90s toy fad that burned fast and faded even faster. But there was a far bigger threat looming, one that didn't rise from folklore or legend, but from Japan. Its name? Pocket Monsters, or as the world now knows it, Pokémon. Now, by 1998, Pokémon was dominating Japan and was preparing for its massive US launch. To Joe Morrison, the similarities were more than coincidence. Both franchises featured small collectible creatures tied to point values or stats, and both used the phrase pocket monsters at some point in their branding. Morrison insisted that Pokémon's name, concept, and packaging were too close for comfort. In 2000, Morrison Entertainment Group filed a trademark lawsuit against Nintendo, arguing a rare legal theory called reverse confusion. Now, the claim wasn't that consumers might confuse Pokémon for Monster in My Pocket. It was that Pokémon had grown so overwhelmingly huge that consumers would now assume Monster in My Pocket was ripping off Pokémon, making it impossible for Morrison's original brand to compete or return to the market. It was a classic David versus Goliath. Monster in My Pocket had made $100 million a year at its height. Pokémon made that in a single month. Morrison argued that the law is supposed to protect the original trademark holder, regardless of how massive the competitor becomes. Nintendo countered that the two franchises were distinct, with entirely different characters, styles, and gameplay. The courtroom drama peaked in 2000 when an LA Superior Court judge ruled in Nintendo's favor. The judge determined that Monster in My Pocket was now a famous enough trademark to qualify for protection under the reverse confusion theory. Essentially, Pokémon had grown so large that Monster in My Pocket was no longer considered recognizable enough for confusion to matter. Morrison appealed the decision, but the appeal failed. That ruling effectively buried the franchise in the United States. And even after the legal defeat, Monster in My Pocket refused to disappear entirely. In Europe, especially in the UK, the brand retained a loyal fanbase. In 2006, Corinthian Marketing released a reboot featuring fully painted, highly detailed figures that were modernized versions of the classics. Fans who collected them praised the intricate detail, but the line suffered from minimal marketing, limited distribution, and almost no presence outside of Europe. Without a cartoon, a new game, or strong retail partnerships, the revival just fizzled out pretty quickly. Now today, Monster in My Pocket lives on as a nostalgic cult classic. For collectors, the line represents a perfect snapshot of early 90s toy culture, blending cheap, easily collectible figures with deep lore drawn from centuries of world mythology. Its influence is undeniable. It helped establish the formula that Pokémon, Digimon, and countless other collectible creature franchises would later refine and perfect. And while Pokémon became the global powerhouse, Monster in My Pocket was the prototype, a franchise that built the blueprint and then, unfortunately, lost the war. In the end, the rise and fall of Monster in My Pocket shows how volatile the toy industry can be. The brand had a brilliant concept, strong artwork, a rich world, and a devoted fan base. But in a market where timing, marketing muscle, and corporate power can make or break a franchise, even a $100 million empire can vanish almost overnight. Yet for a generation of kids, long before Pikachu, Charmander, and Bulbasaur filled their Game Boys and lunchboxes, their pockets were home to an entirely different kind of monster. And that legacy, fading, fragmented, but unforgettable, is something no lawsuit can ever truly erase.